start a nonprofit. And I want to thank Coastal States Bank, who is sponsoring, obviously, this entire series. There are 1,600 nonprofits between just Beaufort and Jasper County alone. And that number is probably a little outdated at this point, but it sort of tells you how important nonprofits are to our community. I also want to welcome Luana Graves Sellars, who is our presenter. She is the founder of Lowcountry Gullah Foundation, which is a 501c3, as well as Lowcountry Gullah, a 501c4. She is also the owner and founder of Sankofa Communications and has a wonderful podcast, which I'll give a plug for her at this point, Lowcountry Gullah. If you want to learn about the Gullah Geechee, obviously, community and the people who support it, I highly recommend you listen to her podcast, as well as her website that has a wealth of information. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Luana.
Well, thank you, Karen. I really appreciate not only the introduction, but the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about the nonprofit sector and how I got started and a lot of the steps that I utilized to form the two nonprofits that I have. So with that being said, today's agenda is going to really start with the structure of how to even get to the point of putting together and wanting to have a nonprofit, and then deciding what the mission for that nonprofit would be, then going into the process of setting it up, and then there's a great summary slide at the end that will cover all of the different elements that I'm going to go through. So with that being said, Karen, if you can switch slides for me. Karen, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah, it's hold on. Oh, there we go. It sometimes gets stuck. Okay, we're good.
So the slide previously, which you don't even need to go back to, basically said, so what is your mission? What do you want this nonprofit to be, and what do you want it to do? And also, what do you need it to do? So the first four essential pieces of why you need to put together a nonprofit is basically, first you need to describe the need. There has to be a need for what your plan is. And then once you figure out what that need is, you need to quantify it and make sure that you are being able to not only describe that need, but also deliver all of the different elements that need requires. And then what you also need to figure out is who needs this nonprofit, who is on the list of people that you will serve. And then, of course, it's always vitally important, if it's a nonprofit or even just a business, you need to define who else is addressing the need and to see if there is any kind of competitiveness between what your nonprofit is going to do and what another nonprofit is already doing. Karen? The other way.
That's the next slide.
Oh, the next one then.
You got it.
There we go.
There we
here
go.
are some key questions for you. So what will the nonprofit's mission be? Is it an important mission? Is it something that people are interested in? Is there a need? And just to go back to my foundation, my Lowcountry Gullah Foundation, there are two. The foundation specifically focuses on heirs property issues and preserving historic Gullah land. The other nonprofit, which is the C4, is specific to telling the stories and the traditions of the culture. So that's very laser thin and targeted on what I'm delivering through this nonprofit. And so once you decide what will the nonprofit do, you also need to target those services. What kind of person are you going to use? For Lowcountry Gullah, I actually have two targets. The first one is people who are within the Gullah culture because they are interested in learning about the culture. But there's also a genuine interest in the culture from people who are not Gullah. So those are my two targets. And if you can narrow it down even further, for me, it's 18 plus is my target. But for your nonprofit, you might have a more specific, maybe 25 to 34 or 25 to 54, whatever is the specific demographics of that particular individual you're trying to reach. And so once you go through all of that, you also need to know what need will the nonprofit serve? Is it going to serve a need? Is there going to be a mission that they're going to focus on? For instance, like I said, with Lowcountry Gullah Foundation, we're specifically helping Gullah families hold on to their historic Gullah land. When you identify all of the different elements in these questions, they should be something that you can fit into a one sentence answer. And if it is a broad paragraph on what those three questions are, then you need to become a little bit more targeted in what you're going to do. So what are you going to call the nonprofit? Does the name fit your mission? Will people, when they see the name, will they identify it with the mission? For instance, again, Lowcountry Gullah. I'm very specific on the Gullah, what I call the Gullah focus that I have. And so make sure that your name and the mission are well in line. Then you need to find out, is that name available? You're going to have to do a search on it through not only the state, but also just Google it and see if it's available. And if it's a name that you plan on having and is specific, like Lowcountry Gullah, I trademark that name because obviously I want to protect it. So that's another element that you might want to look into. And then the other key question is, who's going to be on your board? Because the board of directors is vital to the mission. Are they in line with the vision that you have for the nonprofit? Are they supportive? Do they have the kind of roles and professional backgrounds that will be beneficial to your nonprofit? All of those questions are key. Karen? So once, this is just a structural map that you can use to figure that out. So once you've identified the cause and the name and the mission for the nonprofit, do that search to make sure that you're not taking over someone else's name or competing with another organization. But once you get into the organizational structure of your nonprofit, you need to come up with a mission, vision, and value statement, a business plan, because a nonprofit is a business just like any other business. But with a nonprofit, you need to have bylaws that will create the organizational structure that you have. And once you have that, whether you're going to establish that up front, or if it's something that you are going to create under the supervision and the advice of your board of directors, then you need to start looking at the type of officers that you're going to need to have as part of the organization. You're going to need a chair, you're going to need a vice chair, you're going to need a financial secretary, and then you're going to need a secretary to handle all of the minutes and all of those different structural items that are vital to the organization. And then once the board of directors is together, you're going to have to figure out who's going to be on your operations team. Are you going to have an executive director, or are you going to do double duty with your executive director and say one of your board members? If you're planning to have a fairly large organization, then of course you might have the financial support for employees. If not, then you're going to have structural support of volunteers. So it's a lot of moving parts, but I'm going to break down a lot of what I'm just saying, starting with the mission, vision, and value statement. Karen? So why do you need a nonprofit business plan? First of all, the business plan will help you connect the passion that you have in nonprofit service to your plan of action. And that's vitally important because if it's a disconnect between the two, then it's going to be hard to kind of figure out how the nonprofit is going to move going further into the future. Then what you're going to need to do is plan your operations so that you have clear goals and that you build a stable, trusted organization. And when you have that, then of course you're going to need money. So you want the organization to be trusted so that when you go out for grants and out into the community, you want the organization to actually speak for itself and be an organization that people will not only come to because they need the services, but also be able to trust in that you're doing the right thing with your work. Now, thirdly, you also need to be able to communicate that vision to other people, and as well as board members and major donors. Karen? So with your business plan, these are some of the different elements that need to go into the business plan. And I'm going to start to the right with the company description because it's really important to know what that description is. And in describing the company, keep it tailored and succinct into a short paragraph or maybe 2 paragraphs, but I wouldn't go further than that. Part of that plan needs to have a market analysis that's comparing other nonprofits to the services that you're providing, as well as what other nonprofits are out there that you could even partner with in order to make what your work is doing more successful. Of course, you need to have a financial plan because no plan is a good plan if you don't have finances. So what kind of structure are you going to have for financial support that will sustain the nonprofit? And then that organizational structure. In the beginning, it's probably going to be very lean, maybe just the board and the executive director. But once you create the needs that the nonprofit is going to do, you're going to have a structure to even implement those different elements of the nonprofit. Do you have a product that you're going to be providing or a service? And between the two, they're both very important. And I'll take it back to Lowcountry Gullah. One of the ways that Lowcountry Gullah has been able to support itself is that we have an online market, call it the Lowcountry Gullah Market, where we actually sell Gullah products that are connected to the culture. For instance, Gullah art, Gullah books, Gullah cookbooks, things of that nature. And that's what's been really a nice foundation for keeping the nonprofit going. And then lastly, you have to put together an executive summary. And I can't really tell you how valuable the executive summary is and the company description is. When you start looking into grants, those 2 elements are the most important thing that you're going to have that you will utilize. I can't tell you, I probably look at my executive summary and company description, not look at it, but use it for grants or to share information. I have both on a one sheet that can be easily sent out to people when I'm trying to explain what the nonprofits do. So those 2 are vitally important, but you need to make them very tight and specific and targeted to what you're working on. Karen?
Yeah, Luana, question. Should a
Sure.
new nonprofit consider using a third party person to help them do all these things? Because it could be overwhelming for someone who obviously has a wonderful mission in mind, but doesn't have the expertise to do these properly.
Absolutely. And later into the PowerPoint, I do get into some specifics on who might be able to help. But if you have the ability to put everything together, then that's great. If you need help, definitely reach out to someone, especially SCORE. I mean, they're a great resource with coming together or putting together your business plan so that all of the different elements that you need are at a point where you can move forward. Um, but you might find some people will need to pay, you'll have to pay them. With my nonprofits, I did it all by myself because I wanted to or I was able to put it all together. But absolutely, if you need help, ask for help, because if you do it and you are missing elements, like if you're going for a grant, then it's going to slow down the money flow that you need if you don't have all of these different elements together.
There's another question, and I don't know if you're going to answer this later on, but when and if a board member change is done once registered with the state, does this need to be changed legally or formally? And what is the process?
What you said, when a board member is changed?
Yes, once it's been registered with the state. So after you've gone through your registration, you say, here's my board members, but now they've changed. Do you have to, what does this need to be changed legally and formally? And what is the process?
No, it doesn't. As far as your annual report is concerned, that's when you would update things. But if let's say you go through 3 board members in a year, you don't have to keep changing the information.
Okay. And anyone else who has questions, please put them into the Q&A, and we'll keep asking them as we go through. Okay, Luana, thank you.
Absolutely. Sure. Just jump in. Okay, so these are some of the sections of a profit business plan. Again, you have your executive summary, you have the description, the needs analysis, the product and service, the marketing strategy that you're going to use, your management team, and that board. And do you need human resources? And see, this is important because there are a lot of nonprofits who, in order to get certain grants, you have to have DEI strategies. You have to have a DEI or a diversity plan in place, because a lot of organizations are asking that kind of information. So if you have it up front, then it's just something that you can refer back to instead of scrambling to put together beforehand. And the management team is very important because you want people to have a connection to not only what the mission is, but you want them to have a professional background that coincides with the organization, so that it is seen as a valuable element of the organization. And then, of course, your finances. Karen?
So 2 questions. So how do you update the annual report with those changes? I guess this is going back to the board question.
Well, with your when you first start your application with the state, and you know what, I'm actually going to get into that. So I'll skip that question for a second.
Okay. And then the second question is, can you define DEI?
Oh, it's diversity and inclusion.
It's diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Equity and inclusion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's that on the questions.
So with the nonprofit description, these are some of the questions that you need to cover. Why did you start the nonprofit? What does the nonprofit do now? What do you hope to be able to do in the future? And of course, with any business plan, you need to have short-term goals as well as long-term goals. Where are you located? Who do you serve? How do you achieve your mission? What are the things that your nonprofit does to achieve and fill the needs that are necessary? And how do you define and measure the impact that your nonprofit is achieving? Because if you're going to do a grant, I will bet you and win the bet that that will be one of the questions that you will always get on a grant application is how do you define yourself and how do you measure your impact? And the last one is why will you be successful? So a lot of these questions are questions that when you come to a grant application, it's good to have all of this ready because you'll learn that the questions are very similar and it's fabulous to be able to cut and paste and just tweak the answers that you're putting into those grant applications. Karen?
Yeah, and the only thing I would interject is, again, and Luana mentioned this earlier, is someone else in your area offering the same service. We ran into an issue with a nonprofit that was duplicating a service. And when they went for a grant, they said, well, why are you doing this? Because so-and-so was doing this. So be very, very careful about who's doing it. And quite frankly, it might be to your benefit to join forces with that person, the other organization, than something else. There is a comment on the Q&A, and it's basically says, just a thought, the board is determined by the bylaws, business plan, and or articles of incorporation. Yes, that might be true, but the names necessarily may not be on there at that point. So it's more, yes, they may say you have a treasurer, financial, whatever person, a secretary, but it may not be obviously the person that, the name of the person doing the actual job, so.
Exactly. And you might not have it all depends on the order that you do things. For me, I put together the organization and then got board buy-in. Some people might want to do it from board buy-in and get your board together first and then do it. So it's all in how you want to structure it. So I put this in here because that executive summary is so important. And just to further drill down on what an executive summary is, it's a brief section at the beginning of anything that you might do, whether it's a report, an article, a recommendation, or a proposal that summarizes the document. And again, you'll be amazed at how often and how handy of a tool it is to hold on to. So between the executive summary and the mission statement, those are the two keys that you need to make sure are solid. So just to give you an example of what and how to put together a mission statement, the mission statement captures a company's purpose and articulates the why and the how. For example, to save lives by improving heart health and preventing heart disease through education and research. Very concise, very straight to the point. The mission statement should only be a sentence. If you start getting into more than a sentence, then you're not being as targeted as you could be with your mission statement. Karen?
Another question, what is a board buy-in?
Well, you want to make sure that, financially, that could be.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay. Well, two things. When you're putting together your board, you want to make sure that the people not only believe in the mission and they want to be a part of the mission, but you also want to have a board that is active. You don't want to have a bunch of lame ducks sitting on the board. So having a working board and a board that has different professional elements to the board, that will be supportive. For instance, if you want an attorney or a, someone who has a financial background or whatever goes into the nonprofit that you want to use.
And I would say is as part of the series, we do have a board management workshop that's coming up, and you'll see it at the end. We have a listing of all the other ones. If you can attend, please register, because then you'll get the information, and we'll go into this in a lot of detail. The next question is addressed to SCORE. And does SCORE offer services and consultations to help determine the needs of your specific nonprofit? And yes, they do. What they do is that we will run through a business plan with you in the various sections that Luana did, and basically walk through you saying, well, why are you creating this nonprofit, and how do you define the needs? But we will help you put it in black and white. And if you want a SCORE person to help you, go to our website, score.org. Again, it'll be at the end, you'll see it, and find a mentor, and in there ask that specific questions that you need help, obviously, with setting up a workshop. And that's the end of the questions. Now,
and full disclosure, Karen is my mentor. So doing a nonprofit, I've run a business in the past, but running a nonprofit was not something that I had done before. So Karen and SCORE was very instrumental in helping me get a lot of this done for Lowcountry Gullah. So
go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, no, I was just going to say, so going back to the mission statement, these are the three things that you need to make sure that you are focusing on: the mission, the vision, and the values. Not only what is the mission statement, but where or what do you envision the nonprofit achieving? What is most important for the nonprofit to do? How do you want the nonprofit to be perceived? And what kind of structure do you have? And the structure goes to the values that are important in the mission. And of course, the integrity of the nonprofit. Is it diverse? Are you planning to be inclusive? Is it a public nonprofit or a private nonprofit? And I'm going to go into a little bit more about those two in a second. Karen? So when you're looking to put together your board members, you need to be able to focus on a lot of different elements, because what I have learned is, and I'm sure that different people have heard, different companies that have boards. If the board is not in line with your vision and the big picture that you're looking for, it's possible for your board to remove you from the nonprofit. So you definitely want someone who's going to be on the board that is not only going to be supportive, but really involved in helping you deliver the vision of the nonprofit. And so the board needs to also focus on having an equitable workspace. If it's going to have diversity, all of those human resources elements that go into running a business, the board is essentially the gatekeepers of all of those kind of decisions and influences that are important. They should help you to guide you with insight and inspiration, and also have the knowledge and expertise to help create the change that you need to grow and become the organization and nonprofit that you're looking to become. Karen? So finding those board members is so vitally important. And like I just said, having them be on top of the same direction that you want to go is important, so that there are no squabbles that kind of come out of how the organization is going to be run. But some important questions are, how many board members do you want? You usually have an odd number, so that if you are voting, so that you can have the cohesiveness of either disagreement or agreement. Do they have a passion for the mission? Are they good ambassadors of the nonprofit? You don't want to have someone on your board who you don't want to or feel comfortable sending out into the public and representing the organization in a fashion that might be an embarrassment to the nonprofit. Do they have valuable connections? Do they have connections financially with people who can help bring in money? And what skills or expertise do they have that will enhance the mission that you're working on? Will they be expected to be a working board, or are you just looking for them to make approvals of different things that are going on within the nonprofit? How long of a term will each board member have? Is it a 2-year term? Is it a 3-year term? Is it a 5-year term? Or is it a 1-year term? All of those are important questions. And is the board diverse and representative of the community? And most importantly, the mission. Karen?
There's a question. Can you start and run a nonprofit without board members?
You're supposed to, by state law, you are required to have a board with your nonprofit.
That's absolutely right. You cannot start a nonprofit without a board. It is part of your filing to get your 501c3 and to be officially approved as a tax-exempt organization.
Yes, and part of what you have to file is your bylaws need to be part of your state application for your license. Your registration, not your license.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So how do you establish how the nonprofit is going to operate through those developing those bylaws? And the bylaws are essentially the governance of the organization. Are you going to put rules in effect for the nonprofit? What about policies? The descriptions of your staff, like your executive director's description and any other staff members that you have. The mission of the organization, as well as the mission statement. What is the responsibility of the board? What is their goals? Who is going to make those decisions? How are they going to vote on how to proceed further with any decisions that they make? What kind of ethics will the board have in not only internally within the nonprofit, but externally with the people that you're looking to serve, as well as what kind of corporate structure and administration? And the other thing is that is also really important, are you going to have committees? Because the nonprofit might have different elements of the nonprofit that need to be focused on, and the board could be divided up into different committees that are focused on those specific issues. So the bylaws are very important. And once you put your bylaws together, if you go down the road, say, you're 6 months or a year in, and you've put together rules and different policies, and they're not working for the nonprofit, then change them. Get the board to figure out how it's not working, and then you have to do revisions to the bylaws. But the bylaws is really like the foundation of the building to the nonprofit. Karen?
Okay. There's a couple of questions. After starting
Okay.
after starting your nonprofit, how soon should you apply to become tax exempt, and how long is too long?
Okay, so I'm going to get into all of that filing in a minute, but it is possible to start the nonprofit without having the IRS designation. Actually, I'm about to get into that. So so I'm not
Okay, let me move on to the other ones.
Okay.
And the other one is also, how long does it take to get your NPO and your nonprofit approved? Again, we could probably get into that next. I filed the easy application and was awarded the tax exempt status 509A2. but I do not have a board. Will they take my status away or fine me?
No, they're not going to take your status away, but in order for you to be within compliance of having a nonprofit, you need to get a board together.
And plus, you probably won't be eligible for many of the grants unless you do have a board, just as
Right.
an aside. And are there any positions that family members can hold on the boards or absolutely not?
Yes, there are. In South Carolina, you are limited to 2 family members that can be on your board.
Okay, that's it for now.
Okay, so in drafting your bylaws, you need to start with a plan. And of course, that plan needs to come out of a board meeting. There are lots and lots of templates that you can use as a foundation for your bylaws. You could just Google it and just find one that starts with the structure that you need, and then you just tweak it from there. Of course, the board needs to review it and then you adopt it. But important questions that the bylaws need to have or answer is, what's the strategic plan for the NPO? How often is the board going to meet? How will the board review plans and strategies? And what is the procedure for adopting plans and initiatives?
We have 2 more questions. If a
Okay.
nonprofit status is being taken away for being out of compliance for not filing taxes, well, again, if you're tax exempt, you shouldn't be filing taxes, but not filing tax, can it be reinstated, or do you have to go back through the whole process again?
I believe you have to go through the entire process, but you do have to do a tax return every year. And if you don't do the filing, then I believe it's after 2 years that you will lose your nonprofit status.
And you do have to start all over again. And the other question is, do in-laws count as family?
Yes.
Okay, that answers that question. Okay.
So an important part of the business plan and really the nonprofit is, how are you going to finance the startup? Are you going to start with seed money? Are you going to self-fund it? Are you looking for grants? Do you have an angel investor? I mean, all of these are important ways of figuring out how the nonprofit is going to sustain itself. Remember, for Lowcountry Gullah, I have that market. And so that is one of the primary ways that we have been able to sustain ourselves. But with me, I self-funded the nonprofit and really grew the money through the application of grants and as well as getting donations. Karen? So these are some different kinds of revenue streams that you can use to help the nonprofit survive. So depending on what the plan is for your nonprofit, you might want to charge a fee for service. If you're going to rely on grants, then you can get different nonprofit organizations or charitable foundations to make contributions and get your grants from there. Now, I will tell you that you can apply for grant after grant after grant, but I believe the percentage of grants won is about 10%. So I want to be very realistic with you that, you might apply for 10 grants and you might get 1. But you just have to keep trying until not only you find those grants that in organizations that align with your mission, because their funding will be specific to specific missions. So once you find that, you might find residual years that you'll get consistent money. But finding that particular sweet spot for finding either charitable organizations or corporate I always screw up this word. You know what I'm trying to say. So that you can get that support. And then also, depending on what kind of nonprofit you're running, you might be eligible for government grants. Now, with the government grants, you have to have a particular application that you do so that you can get into the government grants. And the name of it just completely blew out of my mind. Karen, you know what I'm talking
Yeah, I
about?
know what you're talking about, and I've got the same brain freeze right now. So maybe
Yeah,
we'll
well, it's
remember it
gonna
before
come to
the
me
end of this.
before I finish this. Yeah, but
Right.
there's a particular number. It's kind of like a social security number that you need for government grants
Yeah.
that enables you to be able to apply for government grants.
And those are very hard to come by, just so that everybody understands. But there are two other workshops coming up. One is fundraising and the other is grant writing. So if you're interested in learning more about those, please attend those workshops. And the only other thing I would ask or mention is that when you talk about fees for service, make sure it's a fee for the service of the mission of the nonprofit. If you're charging fees for something else, selling t-shirts as an example, that becomes taxable revenue. So you have to be very careful. And I'll just give you an example. If you are a church and you have a religious store right next to it, that religious store and what it sells, whether it's Bibles, statues, whatever, is taxable because the church, that's not necessarily part of the church's mission. So you have to be very, very careful at the end of the day in order to do things. Sam's site, is that the one for the government grant?
Yes, the Sam's number. Thank you, whoever that was.
Yeah,
Yes,
someone just
it's
put
the
it on
Sam's
there
number.
and did it, so
Yeah.
yes, it's the SAM site. And quite frankly, that is true whether you are a nonprofit or a for-profit, that you have to be registered on the SAM site at the end of
Yes.
the day. So
Yeah,
just
it's called a Sam's ID.
SAM's ID at that point. Okay.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, if you're going to go after for grants, if you're going to do special events, if you're going to do donations or receive donations or get in-kind donations from other organizations or corporations, or online fundraising, or any kind of fundraising that you're going to do, that's how the organization needs to be able to sustain itself. So the fundraising is a really vital part of what you're going to do. Next. So when you start your nonprofit, and even before you file with the IRS for your nonprofit status, it is possible for you to operate as a nonprofit and start to accept donations. The only catch is that you have to let them know that you are not yet tax exempt, and they can't write it off until the date that letter you received is signed. Next.
And do keep in mind, when you do that, as far as getting those grants, you will not be eligible to file for grants or any of the foundation charitable philanthropy, because they will require you to show your tax exempt status.
Exactly. And one of the things that I did is I started the 501c4 first, thinking that I could get grants through that, and found that I needed, or that the requirement is that most organizations don't want to give money to nonprofits other than the 501c3, unless they specifically have a target to other kinds of nonprofits.
And there's one comment that someone mentioned, is the number is called a UEI, Unique Entity ID, from Sam's Gov. So thank you very much. Someone asked, what about startup grants? No, you have to have your 501c3 for any type of grants. It's regardless of where. No.
Yeah, no one's going to give you any money until you have your nonprofit status.
Right. And then the next question is, what's the difference between a 501c3 and C4?
You guys are getting ahead of me.
Okay. Let's just keep going then.
Yeah, so let's get into the nonprofit toolkit. Next slide, Karen.
Okay. It's When we stop too long, it freezes on me. There you go.
So just like any other business, you need to have an EIN number that is issued by the IRS. And the EIN is exactly like your social security number. Social security number is for an individual. An EIN number is a 9-digit number that the IRS uses to identify a business. And anything that you apply for, any grants, you're going to need your EIN number. And you're going to need it to open a business account when you're hiring employees, so that you can either 1099 them or W-2 them, as well as it's a protection for your personal information. So the first step is to get that EIN number. Next, once you do the EIN number, and all you have to do is go to the IRS website. It's very simple. It'll take you about 5 minutes to fill out the questionnaire, and then they're going to send you this letter saying that you now have an EIN number. Now, hold on to this piece of paper because you're going to need it time and time again. Like I said, to open a bank account and for your state registration. Next.
There's a question. Do you need a local license to fundraise?
You guys are getting ahead of me.
Here we
I'm
go.
going to answer the question in a second.
There you go. Well, here we are.
So depending on where you are, you need to check with your town and your county to see what kind of business license you need. In most cases, like I'm on Hilton Head, they don't charge a fee for the business license for a nonprofit. And Beaufort County is weird. You need, if you're in like proper county or in certain towns, it's different, but just make sure that you're checking with the town and county to see what you need. Because once you get that EIN number, you need to get your business license. Next. And so what other kind of business licenses do you need? Are you going to sell anything? And then you're going to need a sales tax permit. You're going to need a resale permit. Are you doing something under a corporate name, but the nonprofit is doing business as or a DBA? Do you need a license for that? Are you providing professional services? If that's the case, then you're going to need a professional license like that. I mean, if let's say you're providing medical services or something along those lines, you need a license for that. If you're doing, or if you're fortunate enough to start with a building, or if you're working with buildings or whatever, you might need those kind of permits or any kind of industry specific kind of license. So you need to make sure that whatever you're doing, either on the state, county, or local level, you have all of those licenses in place. Next. So once you start putting everything together, this is a screenshot of the Secretary of State webpage. Once you have your name, this is where you need to search. Once you search to make sure that your name is not in use, then you're also going to be asked who's going to be the key point of contact or registered agent for the nonprofit. The registered agent is only the individual who is going to receive the information. It can be an attorney, but it doesn't have to be. It can be you. I mean, I'm my own registered agent, so that if there are any questions about the nonprofit, it just comes to me because I'm the founder. And that's the website on the bottom.
And that's critical when you're doing this, because obviously if you designate an attorney, it may get lost in the shuffle if there is some type of notification, and it's better to go to someone who's actually working in or with the nonprofit, not as a third-party professional.
Correct. Or even a board member.
Or a board member, absolutely.
You know, your executive director, just somebody who's close by that you can access whatever's going on.
Right. Another question. Will you need a business license if you're offering products and hope for a donation?
Well, it depends on what your products are. I mean, if it's something that you need a license to do, then the answer is yes. If you're making candles, then no. I mean, you know, or something like that, then no, you don't need a particular license for that. So the question comes up, how many different kinds of 501(c)s are there? And believe it or not, there are 32 different types of 501s that are listed under the IRS tax code. Next question, next slide. So these are some of the common nonprofit statuses. Of course, the 501(c)(3) is for charitable organizations. The 501(c)(4) is for social welfare organizations. And just going back to Lowcountry Gullah, because Lowcountry Gullah is focused on helping and educating people on the Gullah culture, that's why it's a 501(c)(4), which also enables me to go and advocate for different issues like heirs property when the situation arises. A C5 is usually labor and agricultural organizations. A 6 is business leagues or trade association, and a 7 is a social or recreational club. Next one. So the most common ones are the 501(c)(3), and that's the largest category of nonprofits that service public good. And they usually fall into two categories: a public charity, which is funded through donations and grants, or private foundations, which are funded through investments and endowments. Now, I'll tell you that when I first put the application in for the 501(c)(3) for the foundation, Lowcountry Gullah Foundation, they designated me incorrectly, the IRS did, as a private foundation. And fortunately, I caught it, but I had to go back and have them reconfigure or redesignate my status. And because if you go the private foundation route, again, you can't get grants through that. A private foundation is one that has its own money that will self-sustain it. Let's say Bill Gates, he probably has a private foundation that he has funded and is using the money that he put into it to keep it going. The public charities are funded through donation and grants. And so that's a really specific distinction that you need to know. With a 501(c)(4), the social welfare organizations, they focus on specific needs or groups than the 501(c)(3), and political advocacy organizations and local level labor unions are common examples. And that's where I was saying before with Lowcountry Gullah, if I need to get into political advocacy, I can with the 501(c)(4), not the 501(c)(3). And one of the questions that you will see on your tax application, your tax filing every year is, are you supporting any lobbying or political advocacy as a 501(c)(3)? And if you do, you will get into trouble. So it's very important to make sure you have that distinction. And then with the 501(c)(6), those are like membership organizations, say the NFL, like a sorority or, fraternity, things like that. Next slide.
Next question is, do you have a separate board for your 501(c)(3) and 4, and do you file separate reports for both?
I have to file separate reports because they're separate organizations or entities, but I have the same board for both.
And Luana, we're going on the 1 o'clock hour, and I know we have a number of more slides. For those in attendance, obviously we will continue doing this. We're going to be probably going beyond the hour mark, but obviously Luana's doing a great job, but just letting you know that we'll probably be another 10 minutes-ish.
Yeah, no, that's fine, because you could skip this slide. I basically have already talked about that, the difference between a public and a private. And so let's get into the forms to apply for a nonprofit. Next one. So there are two. There's a 1023 and the 1023 EZ. And for me, I did the EZ because the turnaround time is shorter. They say it's supposed to be 3 months, but it's the government. So sometimes it takes 6, maybe 8 months, especially coming out of COVID. It took more time than normal. The form 1023, that minimally is a year that it takes for that form to be processed. So depending on what you're looking for as far as time-wise, as well as how much money your nonprofit is looking to bring in the first year, with the easy form, it's got to be less than 50,000. Next form, next slide. So this is just to give you an idea of the different forms that are there. And again, I filled both of these out. It's not rocket science, but it's definitely easy to do. But if you can get away with doing the easy, I would definitely do that. These are the filing fees. For the EZ, it's $275. For the long form, it's $600. If you're filing for something other than a 501c3 or 4, then you need to do the 1024 form or the 1024A. And so those are $600 and $650 for both of those.
And there are two comments on the Q&A is thank you. There's a lot of information to keep up with. I totally agree. This is not easy. I do encourage you. SCORE offers, free and confidential mentoring. We have many mentors who are nonprofit experts. Please reach out to us. And the second is that someone else just recently applied for the easy application last month, and it was a 3 or 4 week turnaround. So that's just for background information at the end.
Well, they must be speeding up because it took close to 6 months for mine. So someone asked earlier, what are some of the different kinds of people that should be on the board? Should you have should you use a bookkeeper or an accountant? If you have a good financial secretary, maybe they can do both. Should you hire one, or should you have them as someone who's volunteering your time? I mean, those are questions that you're going to need to ask yourself. But it is vitally important that you have at least a bookkeeper who can help stay on top of the finances and help grow the grants and the financial foundation that the nonprofit has. Next one. And so when you do get into your tax filings, there are different kinds. The 990 is the form that you're going to get very familiar with. If you're doing gross receipts of under 50,000, that's the N, or otherwise known as the postcard. It's like 3 questions and then you're done. The 990 EZ, you have to have receipts of less than 200,000 and less than total assets of 500,000. If you have more than that, you need to go into the full form. And if you're a private foundation, you just have to do the 990, period. Next slide.
Hold on one second. Come on. Stop freezing on me.
And these are just examples of the different forms. As you can see, the postcard, which is on the left of the screen, those are all the questions that you have to answer in order to file the 990 N. If you go into the other returns, they do get more complicated. If it's a private foundation, there's the PF form. But other than that, you can do the EZ or the 990. Me personally, I've always just done the EZ form versus the full 990. Next slide. And once you file, by the way, once you file for your nonprofit, they will tell you when your return is due. For instance, mine is in May 15th, but they have a rolling calendar. So they'll just inform you of what that date would be. Next slide.
There is a question. Is there a penalty for filing the postcard late?
Yes, there's always a penalty for not doing your return on time. But what I would suggest is if you need extra time, just file an extension. So these are just some things that you need to be informed about regarding nonprofit compliance. You're going to need your corporate requirements, your fundraising requirements, your operational requirements, your accounting requirements, and you need to have proper classification of different employees, as well as you're going to have to maintain record keeping. So, on a state level and even on a federal level, these are the kind of things that you're going to need to have handy, and someone responsible for that registered agent, they can be responsible for having all of this kind of documentation.
And
Next slide.
we will be going into those details in the board management workshop, because we will be going through the corporate and some of the board requirements that you'll be doing. So again, please register for that if you're interested in more information in detail.
And someone asked earlier about getting some help. You can do it if you want to take it on. I'm not a genius by far, but if I just take my time and figure it out, and if I can't figure it out, I ask help. If you do call the IRS, they're actually very helpful and will stay on the line with you. So if you do run into some, questions that you're not sure of, but if you think it's too much to handle, get some help. Or if you even have an attorney that you can either rely on, or better yet, add them to your board so that things like your bylaws, your corporate structure, all of those things are put together the way that they should. Next slide. And so I mentioned earlier that at the end, there's a great slide. Everything that I've just talked about is on this list. So if you hold on to anything, this is like your nonprofit cheat sheet, so that you can go through each of the different stages and handle all of the different elements step by step. Next one. And we've answered a lot of questions, so I don't know if anybody has more.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any more, but as I said, there's, there are 7 workshops we're doing. This is the first, which are going to answer a lot of these questions in detail. So please go to our website, score.org. At the end of the day, there is a question. What is the SAM site?
If you just Google SAM number, you will get it. It is a government site that you will need to go through and register, and then fill out the information so that you can get the SAM's number.
Okay, and I'm not sure about this question. How do you update the annual report with those changes? I'm really not sure what they're trying to say. Obviously, at the end of each year, you go through it. I'm unclear on that question. And then after starting your nonprofit, how soon should you apply to become tax? Well, we've done all those. Wait a second. Why are
Right
we?
away.
Wait a
Yeah,
second.
right away.
Yeah. Okay. All of these are
Because it's
questions
going
we've
to take
already
time.
answered. Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like we've answered a lot of those questions already. Someone has asked me just to go back to, let me hold on to the summary. Let's go back. Yeah. Okay. So again, for those of you, someone asked me to go back to the slide. All these slides and the recording will be sent to everyone. So no need to take a picture if that's what you want to do. You will be getting these at the end of the day. And I don't think, let me double check all the questions. Here is a question. Question for the end. If you decide that your nonprofit name and mission needs to be changed, do you suggest a DBA or creating a new nonprofit?
I'm sorry, say that again.
If you decide that your name is not appropriate and you want to change the name, do you suggest a DBA or start a new nonprofit?
It's easier to do a DBA.
Okay.
It's much easier, because then you're going to have to do the entire process again, pay the fee, you know, if you're going, it's much easier to just do a DBA.
Okay. And then for the 1032 EZ, are there any fee waiver forms, or will you have to always pay out the filing fee?
You have to pay the filing fees. It's the government. They want your money.
Uh, and then the person that was looking about changes is the board changes. I think we addressed that one already. Is that the board change? If there are board changes, is that you do not have to refile. You just obviously have to make note of it in the respective forms that you've got to do at the end of the day. So
Right.
with that, I'm going to go through the wrap-up slides, and we'll just do a brief summary. Here are all the nonprofit workshops coming up. We have them every week, and they are at the same time every Tuesday at noon. So the next one is volunteer management, board management, social media and marketing, grant writing, fundraising, and banking products and nonprofits. Again, if you cannot attend these specific days and times, please register and you will get copies. We also do a series of other workshop series. And actually, the last one that's to be done here is dealing with personal credit and small business banking. While it says this is for vets, it's actually for any business owner. We also have a QuickBooks series. We've got one more left on reporting and report customization. We also have a social media series in which, again, we have one left. But look for these. We'll be starting these up in the new year. So we're just wrapping up these at the end. And I'm going through these quickly because I know you'll be getting these slides at the end. We also do intellectual property protection, and Luana mentioned about copyright. Highly recommend you attending one of these, and how do you protect a business? And Doug Lineberry is actually a very generous person and gives much of his time, and he's great and informational. Many of you asked, how do I get a mentor? Well, this is how you get a mentor. You go to our website and request a mentor. Our services are free and confidential. We have people with a variety of background, not just nonprofit. So please reach out to us, and someone will be in touch with you. And then we were always looking for volunteers at the end. So that if you are interested in becoming part of SCORE, please again reach out to us. And then all of our social media channels that we have that you would expect. And with that, I want to thank Luana at the end of the day.
You're
And
welcome.
much appreciate your time and your energy. I know you're out after doing a presentation out in Hunting Island, so she's squeezing us in with her crazy schedule. And thank you all for joining us. And again, you'll be seeing this copy. And please let people know about obviously the various presentations. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. So thank you for staying with us. And it's as I said, it was 10-ish, so it's 11:11. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.